Welcome back to the Erica the Futurist podcast, where we help you understand the future before you have to live it. I'm Erica, and today we are going somewhere important, somewhere that I think gets glossed over in most AI conversations because the people most affected by it have the least amount of microphone time. Today, we're talking about algorithmic discrimination. We're talking about what happens when the system's making decisions about your life, your loan, your job application, your healthcare, your freedom are not human, and nobody is watching them closely enough to catch when they get it wrong. This episode is based on my latest Substack article, The Algorithm Doesn't See You: Why Human Oversight is the Civil Rights Issue of the Agentic Age. Link is in the show notes. Let's get into it. I want to start with something that I think is genuinely misunderstood, even by people who consider themselves informed about AI. When most people hear algorithmic discrimination, they picture a programmer somewhere deliberately coding in bias, like someone sat down and typed, "If applicant is black, reject." That's not what's happening, and understanding why it's not what's happening is actually the key to understanding why it's so hard to fix. Here's the mechanism. Algorithms learn from historical data. You feed them examples of past decisions, and they find patterns in those decisions that they can use to make future ones. Simple enough, right? The problem is that historical data is a fossil record of a biased world. If you train a hiring algorithm on 10 years of your company's successful employee data, and your company historically hired mostly white men from a handful of elite universities, the algorithm will learn on its own that those characteristics predict success. Not because the algorithm is racist, because the data it learned from reflected a system that already was. The algorithm can't distinguish between this person was genuinely more qualified and this person was given more opportunities by a system that already favored them. It just sees the pattern. It replicates it at scale, at speed. This is happening in mortgage lending, in healthcare, in criminal sentencing, in hiring. Everywhere that historical data is being used to make predictions about future human behavior, those predictions are also inheriting the biases encoded in that history. And here's what makes it worse. The algorithm gets described as objective, as neutral, as data-driven, and that framing makes it almost impossible to challenge. Let me give you the receipts, because this is not theoretical. These harms have names, they have documentation, and they have already cost real people real things. COMPAS. In 2016, ProPublica investigated an algorithm called COMPAS used across the United States in courtrooms to predict whether a defendant was likely to reoffend. Judges use these scores to inform bail decisions, parole, sentencing. The analysis found that Black defendants were nearly twice as likely as white defendants to be falsely flagged as high risk. Meanwhile, white defendants who actually did go on to commit additional offenses were more likely to have been labeled low risk. People lost years of their lives to pretrial detention, based in part on a score from a system that was measurably wrong about them, and the company that built it disputed the findings. The courts kept using it. Amazon's hiring tool, 2018. Reuters reports that Amazon had to scrap an internal AI recruiting tool because it was systematically downgrading resumes from women. The system had been trained on 10 years of Amazon hiring data from a tech industry that had historically hired mostly men. The algorithm learned on its own that references to women's organizations were negative signals. Amazon shut it down before full deployment, but it existed and it was being used. mortgage lending. A 2021 investigation by the Markup analyzed 2.7 million mortgage applications and found that lenders were significantly more likely to deny loans to people of color than to white applicants with similar financial profiles. In some cities, Black applicants were denied at rates 80% higher than comparable white applicants. This is algorithmic underwriting doing what it was trained to do and producing discriminatory outcomes at a volume no individual loan officer could have achieved alone. Healthcare. A 2019 study published in Science found that a commercial healthcare algorithm used to identify high-risk patients, an algorithm managing the care of roughly 200 million people in the United States, was significantly less likely to flag Black patients as high need, even when they were sicker than white patients who were being flagged. The reason? It used healthcare spending as a proxy for healthcare need. Because Black patients have historically received less care, they'd spent less. The algorithm read that as lower need and quietly rationed their care accordingly. Facial recognition. At least 3 Black men, Robert Williams, Michael Oliver, and Niger Parks, were wrongfully arrested because facial recognition technology misidentified them. These systems are measurably less accurate on darker skin tones because they were trained on data sets that overrepresent lighter-skinned faces. A machine made an error, a human accepted it without adequate verification, and real people went to jail for crimes they did not commit. These are not glitches. These are the predictable outcomes of deploying systems trained on biased data without adequate oversight in high-stakes environments. And now it's time for a quick break for our affiliate offer. Hey, it's Erica, and I want to tell you about something that could save you money every single month. If you qualify for government assistance programs like SNAP, Medicaid, or SSI, you may be eligible for a completely free smartphone and free monthly service through AirTalk Wireless's Lifeline program. That means free talk, text, and data, no strings attached. Checking your eligibility takes less than 2 minutes. I've put the link right below this video. Go see if you qualify today or visit my website at EricaTheFuturist.univer.se. Everything I just described, COMPAS, Amazon, the mortgage algorithms, the healthcare tool, all of that happened in a world where a human was still nominally in the loop. A judge reviewed the COMPAS score. A loan officer reviewed the underwriting recommendation. A doctor could theoretically have overridden the care management output. The oversight was weak. It was deferential. It was largely uninformed about the algorithm's limitations. But it existed. Agentic AI removes that layer. And this is the specific thing I need you to understand going into the next decade. Agentic AI doesn't just make a recommendation, it acts. It chains decisions together, sourcing candidates, filtering applications, scheduling interviews, drafting offers, without a human approving each step. An agentic lending system doesn't just score your application. It requests your documents, orders the appraisal, and issues a decision. An agentic healthcare system doesn't just flag a risk. It adjusts your care plan. When the bias is in the screening layer, and that layer is operating invisibly and at speed, the harm compounds through every downstream decision before any human ever sees a red flag. That is the specific danger we are walking into right now. And the economic incentives to deploy these systems fast are enormous. The political will to regulate them adequately has historically been weak. And the communities most at risk are the same communities that have always had the least power to demand accountability before the harm happens rather than after. So what do we actually do? Because I don't want to be a show that just names the problem and leaves you there. Here's what meaningful accountability looks like in plain language: pre-deployment auditing. Before any algorithm is used to make consequential decisions, hiring, housing, credit, healthcare, criminal justice, it should be independently audited for discriminatory outcomes, not self-certified by the company that built it, independent, third party, with public results. New York City's Local Law 144 started this for hiring tools. The EU's AI Act went further. The United States needs to close the gap. Real explainability. If an algorithm makes a decision that affects your life, you have a right to an explanation that is specific enough to actually evaluate. Not your risk score was too high. A real explanation. What factors were used, why, and whether those factors were legal. If a system cannot explain itself in terms a layperson can evaluate, it should not be making decisions that affect people's liberty, housing, or health. Meaningful override rights, not a rubber stamp human in the loop, a human who has access to the algorithm's known limitations, who has organizational permission to push back, who is not being evaluated primarily on whether their decisions align with the machine's output. That is what meaningful human oversight actually requires. Continuous monitoring, bias audits at launch are not enough. These systems drift. The world changes, the data changes. There need to be ongoing monitoring requirements, reporting obligations, and mandatory remediation triggers, not just a one-time checkbox at deployment. Community representation. The people most likely to be harmed by these systems need to be in the room when they are being designed, tested, and governed, not as a symbolic gesture, as a structural requirement. They will catch failure modes that technical teams miss because they have lived experience with exactly the systems these algorithms are trained on. Legal liability. Right now, when an algorithm causes discriminatory harm, accountability is diffuse and contested. That has to change. Clear legal frameworks that assign liability for discriminatory algorithmic outcomes based on disparate impact, not just intent, would change the incentive structure more effectively than any voluntary commitment to fairness ever will. Here's what I want to leave you with today. The algorithm doesn't see you. Not because it was designed to erase you, but because it was trained on a world that already did. And if we hand that world's biases to a system that moves faster, decides more, and involves fewer human checkpoints than anything we've built before, we are not building a neutral future. We are building an accelerated version of an unequal past. The good news, and I mean this, is that the architecture of oversight gets built right now. The design choices made in the next 5 years about how these systems are governed will determine whether agentic AI amplifies existing inequities or operates under constraints strong enough to prevent that. That window is open, but it won't stay open. So stay informed, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Read the full article. Link is in the show notes. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the Erica the Futurist Substack at ericathefuturist.univer.se, where I go even deeper every week. I'm Erica, helping you understand the future before you have to live it. I'll see you next episode.